Thank you, Dr. Narayan. It's an honor to be here, to receive this award, and to have the opportunity to address all of you. I'm here today to speak about the development of the Cerebral Palsy Toolkit, a comprehensive diagnosis resource guide for families. The name of my talk is From Chaos to Cohesion, Making Sense of CP for Caregivers. I don't have anything to disclose. I'm going to begin with my daughter, Lilly. Some of you know her by her middle name, which is Maya. Lilly is a spunky, outspoken 9-year-old. She loves listening to electronic dance music while wearing her pink wireless headphones. She attends a Montessori school, and she'd like to get a belly ring as soon as her father and I say it's okay. She also has CP, epilepsy, and cortical visual impairment. Her functional mobility classification is a GMFCS4, so she primarily uses a wheelchair to get around, and she requires support and assistance for most of her daily living activities. Lilly was delivered by C-section at 33 weeks at the University of Virginia. I had developed preeclampsia, and we both had gone as far as we could with the pregnancy. Once she was born, she quickly moved through a number of early complications that were related to prematurity. And unfortunately, after 7 days and an initially clear head ultrasound, she developed a significant bleed in her brain. It's still painful to even say that to all of you. Now, if Lilly were in this room with me, she would probably shove me over, and she would quickly and loudly chime in and tell you not to get bogged down in the details of her medical history, because those facts don't tell you her whole story and who she is and how far she has come. She is a bold little girl, yet she is gentle. She is honest with herself and others, and she approaches life with an authenticity and determination I and so many others, even strangers, deeply admire. She doesn't hesitate to advocate for herself or tell you what's on her mind, just like her mom. Lilly is why I stand before you today and why I've spent the last 7 years advocating for the cerebral palsy community, dedicating my time to the development of the CP Daily Living website, the nonprofit CP Now, and creating the first cerebral palsy toolkit, which I'm so excited to introduce to you today. Over the next 15 minutes, I will be sharing with you what led me and a very dedicated group of parents to develop this resource. I will give you a small window into part of our family's journey. And it's a journey that's similar to what many other parents go through when they have a child who's had an early brain injury. I'd like to briefly illustrate how difficult it is for families to understand the diagnosis of CP and to manage the period of time leading up to that when they don't have access to organized and reliable information and support. The following is a small illustration from our family's early history with Lilly. We were extremely frightened and lost from the time Lilly developed a bleed when she was in the NICU. And it continued and was a very stressful, words can't describe the amount of stress and pain that you go through as you are waiting and seeing, words that I hope will go away soon from our vocabulary. But as we were waiting and seeing and kept in limbo for 12 months until she was finally diagnosed with cerebral palsy, it kind of feels like you're treading water. We knew our child had a brain injury and she was at risk for CP, and that's more than some parents get. But beyond that, we were really shocked by the lack of clinical protocols. I remember looking to my husband, who's a physician, and I asked, well, why aren't they doing anything? Why are we just waiting? And he didn't have much of a response. He said, that's just what we do. So we struggled to learn what happened. We wanted to know what we could do and when we could do it. We wanted to know how to best support Lilly, and we didn't have many answers or much guidance. Since then, the CP community has made a lot of progress, but we still have a long way to go. I'm really happy about the general movements assessment and that it's gotten a lot of attention. I hope it becomes more widely discussed and used in the US to diagnose CP earlier. So empower us with knowledge, and this is something that is sort of at the core of what inspires me. Most parents want to be armed with information and support. Instead of having to uncover conditions they are not prepared to understand or address. So despite some of the great physicians and therapists that we have worked with and we've had the good fortune to be able to travel to see, I and most of the parents out there are often the central care managers for their children. Parents are often not educated or prepared for this role emotionally or practically. Since Lilly was born, I struggled for basic knowledge about CP and its related conditions. I have only learned what I have needed by coming here and learning from all of you, or by having my husband print off articles from medical journals that we would review together. Most parents don't have that luxury. I hear far too often from parents whose physicians don't know about the importance of conducting pain evaluations, hip surveillance, or who didn't realize that insomnia is a complex issue that affects many people with CP and for many reasons. Often parents don't realize that behavioral problems can be common and sometimes tied to untreated sources of pain. There are so many instances I can recall of parents who reached out to me privately and thanked me for sharing a story about our family because they thought they were the only ones going through something with their child, whether it was issues around anger or insomnia. Sometimes if we don't have answers, parents just want to feel validated. So many parents, they aren't hearing the things that they need to hear to be the best advocates for their children. They aren't hearing about the importance of exercise, positioning, having their child bear weight, the benefits of power mobility at an early age, and more. In our case, I discovered that Lilly had a visual processing disorder by sitting in a lecture at the Academy 3 years ago. This was despite her being followed by a variety of eye care professionals since she was a year old. Cortical visual impairment was never on my radar, and I had no idea how pervasive this condition was among children with brain injuries and neurological disturbances. My daughter had just entered kindergarten, and we had begun to notice some peculiar things as she was getting into academics, but no one could really figure out the source of these symptoms. And my friend and a fellow advocate, Jennifer Lyman, dragged me to a lecture by Dr. Roman Lancy. And midway through that lecture, I became very emotional, and I started to cry. I realized that a lot of her symptoms that we could not figure out could be traced to her having great difficulty processing visual information. From that day, I began investigating and piecing together a program and accommodations for her that have completely changed her ability to learn and understand her visual world. She has the opportunity now to excel in the classroom, and she didn't before. We didn't know. We didn't know this was an issue, potentially for us, or for many other children with CP. And I have another example about parents and clinicians not having the information they need. And I'm very hopeful that the new Care Pathways program will improve the professional knowledge beyond the academy. I know a set of twins in high school who both have CP, and they're both taking narcotics for their dislocated hips. No one had been conducting hip surveillance on them. They're 17 years old. By the time they had begun to experience pain, their hips weren't salvageable anymore. How many parents out there don't know about conditions impacting their child's development and learning? A lot. And there's a lot of gaps in their knowledge. Parents need to know about common issues that people with CP may face, whether they ultimately impact their child or not. We need to have the chance to be proactive, to give our children the best chance to succeed and be healthy and to be as comfortable in their bodies as possible. We need information to do this, and if clinicians don't have it, then parents need to be able to come forward and advocate for their children. 7 years ago, when my daughter received an official diagnosis, we were handed a very dismal set of papers that had been copied and recopied for what looked like decades. They made me feel kind of lousy. They didn't offer the help and insight that I was looking for, so I dove in and I began searching for online support and resources. And at the time, I didn't find much there. Now, the landscape has changed quite a bit, which is fantastic. But from this experience, I came to develop the blog and resource website, CP Daily Living. And in it, I created what I felt our family needed but never found, a place to anonymously pop in and out of that would offer reliable information about CP and its related conditions. I wanted to offer practical solutions and share experiences families commonly face in raising a child with CP and extend emotional support and validation. I wanted to stop the cycle of families who were confused, who felt disconnected from other families experiencing the same things. Through CP Daily Living, I created a virtual library that includes subjects such as selecting a daycare or preschool program for your child. What kinds of questions can you ask? How do you begin to talk about the fact that you have a child who has individual needs? I have blog posts about navigating the first wheelchair purchase, hot topics in CP research, how to travel with your child, which I was determined to provide some kind of insight about this after having a really tough time doing that for a couple of years with Lilly. And we also have a blog post about potty training readiness in CP. I also share very personal stories, such as how I faced my daughter asking me at the age of 3 if she would ever walk. I use our personal experiences to offer insight and practical information that families can build from. The CP Daily Living website keeps growing, and what began as a small contribution to the CP community has turned into something much bigger than myself or that I ever anticipated. I have found my virtual doorstep filling up with families and adults with CP from all over the world who are starving for information, community news, and clarity, even about the things that are not understood in CP. I receive emails and comments on blog posts from people expressing gratitude for our family's openness and for welcoming them into the fold of our daily life, for sharing the hurdles we face and the emotions we are working through. Last year, and after 5 years of running CP Daily Living, it became apparent that we needed to be able to fundraise beyond our own family's resources in order to meet some new goals that I had set. And in the summer of 2015, CP Now received nonprofit status in 6 short weeks. And I'm going to skip over some of this and save some time. So this is a slide it's a picture of the cover of the CP Toolkit. And this was something I always envisioned creating. And last year, I finally took the steps to bring it to fruition with a team of fantastic parent volunteers and CP experts, many of you who are sitting here today. It became available 7 years after my daughter was diagnosed with CP, and more than a century after CP was documented in scientific and medical literature. This kind of resource has been long overdue. So what does the CP Toolkit include? It presents a framework for understanding the diagnosis and the conditions that affect our community that fall outside of motor function and coordination. It includes real family photos and highlights adults with CP and the diversity of passions and interests they have. It acknowledges the range and complexity of emotions families face in coming to terms with the diagnosis. It humanizes the condition of CP and offers reassuring words from other families and the coping strategies they have used to help them move forward. It discusses the diversity of diversity of presentations, and provides an overview of terminology that parents are likely to hear when interacting with their professional team. It also includes information about common clinical assessment scales such as the GMFCS and MACS, and it shares the importance of parents speaking up to round out what those assessments are saying about the child. It presents the gaps in treatment and research and details what isn't happening and what is happening for CP. And this gives parents an opportunity to understand where advocacy is needed. It offers strategies for thinking through treatments, and it provides information about insurance and respite resources in the US. So here's where you can make a difference. We have postcards which you can use to introduce families to the CP Toolkit. There's an example of one of them in your attendee packets. These postcards are free, and you can request them by emailing me through the CP Now website. We have some endorsements from different users. One is from World CP Day, and they said it's written in clear, parent-friendly style and supported by the latest clinical evidence. This is a must-read for any parent who has a child diagnosed with CP. And I also have here a quote from a mother whose child was recently diagnosed. Her name is Maura, and she said, "I felt great relief when I discovered the CP Toolkit. It was just a few months after we received my son's diagnosis, and I still had so many questions. The information provided was clear and easy to understand, and decoded much of the medical jargon I was hearing. In addition to providing information, it addressed the emotional journey we are on as parents. It was so helpful to know that we are not alone in this, and that there's a community of parents who understand our family and the journey ahead." This next slide are some statistics, because I know this audience loves statistics. So the majority of people who have downloaded the toolkit have been parents who have a child with CP. And the second most frequent would be clinicians or people who work with or educate people with cerebral palsy. We've had 450 copies downloaded as of a few days ago, and those are free. The printed copies that have been purchased through Amazon, those total 831, and We do have a guide that tells you how to download the toolkit on your mobile device and onto a reader as well. Okay. So we had some surprises. We have quite a few people from countries around the world that have downloaded the toolkit, some that I had never even heard of. But I think it's pretty incredible, and I feel it demonstrates that we have a great need out there. So regardless of where we are with research and with treatment, parents need access to reliable information and to know that people have come before them who wish to offer their insight and support. This is a big part of what CP Now is about, creating educational resources in an emotionally supportive context. So what are we working on for the near future? We're developing additional resource guides on topics pertinent to people with CP and their families, beginning with an early intervention toolkit and a guide for transitioning to adulthood. I'm not so good at this. Okay. I have some people that I need to thank. First, I want to thank the parent committee that helped organize and put together the CP Toolkit. They spent countless hours writing, editing, and compiling information and putting up with me to make this resource possible. I want to thank all of the professional reviewers and contributors who humbly extended their insight and expertise to us. I feel deeply grateful for your support. I also must thank my very patient husband, who's an amazing father. His passion and support for CP extends beyond our own family. I'm going to get all emotional. Thank you, Dr. Stevenson. You have been tremendously patient, and you took an early interest in this project, and you spent time in between patients to help me when I was stuck and to offer me ongoing encouragement and wisdom. And I'm so grateful to you. So I'm going to end where I began, and that's with my daughter, Lilly. And at the end of the day, I want to offer her the opportunity to reach her greatest potential, whatever that may be. That's what I think everyone deserves, and empowering parents with knowledge at the outset is the first big step for them to accept and empower their child to live their best life possible. And this song, which I don't know how I'm going to press play, but this is a song from my favorite movie, Zootopia, and it captures her resilience and passion for life. Thank you.